From West Virginia Public Broadcasting.
Support for the Legislature Today has been provided by the following. The High Technology Foundation, headquartered at the I-79 Technology Park in Fairmont. Online at wvhtf.org. Connecting West Virginia families and businesses through high-speed internet services. Learn more about connecting at frontier.com.
At the Legislature today, wireless phone companies would be required to allow law enforcement to track the phone of a missing person under a bill that passed the House today. It's part of a national effort after a young woman in Kansas went missing. And we'll begin a discussion about children in poverty. We'll talk with Senator John Unger about his new committee working on the issue this session. This is the Legislature Today. Good evening, I'm Beth Voorhees. Weeks of discussion, debate, and negotiations came to an end today as Governor Tomlin's education reform bill was taken up for a vote in the Senate today. Ashton Mara was on the Senate floor and joins us now. What happened?
Beth, the bill was passed unanimously by the Senate today, but not after some intense negotiations over the weekend that included lawmakers, union leaders, and members of the State Board and Department of Education. From those discussions, Senate Education Committee Chair Senator Robert Plymel of Wayne County brought forward amendments to Senate Bill 359, started with changes to hiring.
Let me tell you what this amendment does. It changes the hiring practices. What it does add is it adds 3 additional elements to the hiring practice. It adds the national board certification, a teacher that is nationally board certified, to the hiring criteria. It also adds in a provision to allow the principal to have a recommendation as well. It does with the faculty senate.
He says of the hiring criteria, the recommendations of a school principal and faculty senate will both be weighed doubly as compared to the other 9 elements. Those include things like certification, seniority, or previous evaluations. Plymel said nationally board certified teachers have been proven to increase student achievement by as much as 10%. He also explained the section on school calendars had been changed, requiring schools to meet the 180 instructional day mark within 48 weeks instead of the 43 listed in current law. West Virginia Education Association President Dale Lee said he was as happy as he could be with the changes.
We're happy with the amendments we saw. I don't think anyone is completely happy in any kind of negotiations, but from where we were to where we are now, it made positive strides, and it's only because we stood united in this and the voices of teachers and service professionals were heard across the state.
Another major change was the removal of any reference to Teach for America or a national teaching corps. State Board of Education President Wade Linger said the goal of that section was to help get teachers into rural classrooms. But even though it was removed from this bill, the board was asked to partner with the unions and other teaching professionals to study the impact those programs can have on achievement and the possibility of adding them in the future.
What we want is teachers in the classroom. And right now we have a lot of classrooms where that's just not happening. So this was an idea, to help with that problem, and it obviously caused some pushback. So now we've been asked through this to study it, to figure out what can we do to make sure we have good qualified teachers in the classrooms, all the classrooms.
Linger says the bill sets a minimum of 40-minute planning periods for elementary school teachers, but also charges the board with studying their effectiveness. Some portions of the bill, however, did stay the same. For example, the creation of the 5-day pre-K program and requirements for children to be reading on level by 3rd grade. Those were things American Federation of Teachers President Judy Hale said the unions strongly support. But she, Lee, and Linger all agreed this is just the first step in a long road to completely fixing the state's education system.
Putting the reading, the 3 years, first 3 grades of reading in place, that's going to take a while before it really takes effect. There's training that needs to be done. and students that need to go through that process. So, nothing is overnight in education. But we think we've made a good start in some real meaningful education reform in West Virginia.
Governor Tomlin released a statement this afternoon commending the Senate's efforts and calling the bill, quote, landmark legislation. Senate President Jeff Kessler did say last week he expects the bill to pass both houses and be on the governor's desk by Friday.
And we'll see if that happens. A good job reporting this story, Ashton. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
The House received the governor's education reform bill at a special floor session at 3 o'clock this afternoon. It's been referred to the House Education Committee. It will not be considered by the House Finance Committee, however. Dave Mistich has other news from the House today.
Under a bill passed by the House today, your cell phone or iPad could be used to find you. The bill would require wireless telecommunications companies and internet account providers to release the location of a missing person's cell phone in a timely manner. Delegate Tim Miley explained the bill on the House floor.
This bill is known as the Kelsey-Smith Act, and it requires wireless telecommunications companies to timely release location information of a missing person's cell phone to law enforcement in emergency situations. I urge passage of the bill.
House Bill 2046 passed 96-1. Also up for vote was House Bill 2497, which would require applicants for real estate licenses to successfully pass criminal history record checks. Lead sponsor, Delegate Doug Scaff of Kanawha County, explained the reasons for the bill.
Ladies and gentlemen, this is quite simply a safety and security bill. If you think about it from a real estate and the agent standpoint, those realtors have 24 access to your home when they go to show your home. The last thing we need to do is to allow somebody coming maybe from another state to get their real estate license and have 24-hour access. This is no impediment to the business. Usually you get the background checks back up to 72 hours. It takes 90 days for the process. This will be it won't deter anybody from joining. All this is a safety and security. It's a no-brainer bill. If we prevent one sex offender from 24-hour access to your house, we've done our job.
House Bill 2497 passed 97-0. Also today, the House Committee on Health and Human Resources met earlier this morning and took on House Bill 2767, which would require the DHHR to pay for a program for adult drug offenders. Mike Lacey, director of the Division of Probation Services with the West Virginia Supreme Court, told the committee that adult drug courts have been a success statewide.
Currently, there are 20 adult drug courts throughout the state. We spend a little over $3 million a year on those drug courts through the court's budget. We would like to be able to expand our drug courts into those circuits that do not have drug courts. Recently, we have done a statewide study and survey and have discovered that with regard to recidivism rates, only 9.4% of those adults who have gone through our drug courts have recidivated over the last 2 years, which is an outstanding number.
Lacey also noted that drug courts are a less expensive way to treat drug addicts. It costs only $7,100 per year per drug court participant. That's compared to $18,000 per year for incarceration in a regional jail and $24,000 per year if confined to a prison. However, there was some confusion over what the bill asks for, as Lacey fielded many questions about whether or not the DHHR would be taking over the adult drug court program.
We're not asking that DHHR take over the everyday operation of the drug courts, and perhaps I misunderstood that may have been what you meant. All we're asking is that with regard to the treatment providers that we contract with to provide services to our adults in the adult drug courts, that expense would be the responsibility of DHHR. Now, I've been reminded that DHHR gets approximately $12 million of federal funds each year, and that we're asking for $1.4 million of that to be committed to the drug courts.
The committee ultimately decided to lay the bill over until they could hear more about how the bill would affect the DHHR financially. For the Legislature Today, I'm Dave Mistich in the House of Delegates.
In a moment, we begin a series of discussions about children in poverty. First, here's a look at some of the bills introduced in the Senate today. Among the bills introduced in the Senate today, Senate Bill 551 to apply the residential solar energy tax credit of up to $2,000 to each installation of a solar energy system. The bill extends the tax credit until July 1st, 2021. Senate Bill 558 to allow for proof of current military service or honorable discharge by any branch of the United States military, reserve, or National Guard as equivalent experience towards completion of the training requirement for a concealed weapons license. And Senate Bill 560 to increase the recipients of the West Virginia Research Trust Fund to include all state land grant institutions of higher education. Up for passage in the Senate tomorrow, Senate Bill 183 to update the meaning of federal taxable income and certain other terms in the West Virginia Corporation Net Income Tax Act by bringing them into conformity with their meaning for the Internal Revenue Code's definition. Senate Bill 208 to make supplemental appropriations from the General Revenue Fund to the Department of Commerce, the Division of Labor, and the Medical Services Division of the Department of Health and Human Resources. Senate Bill 358 to grant additional investigatory and legal powers and duties of the West Virginia Municipal Pensions Oversight Board. And Senate Bill 446 to maintain conformity with the International Fuel Tax Agreement. 30% of West Virginia boys and girls under age 6 live in poverty, according to the West Virginia Healthy Kids and Families Coalition. Research in brain development shows that social, emotional, and cognitive development is shaped in early childhood and has a lifelong effect. Poor kids are 5 times more likely to have children outside marriage, twice as likely to be arrested, and nearly 3 times as likely to have severe health problems than kids not living near the poverty line. Poor kids also end up earning incomes less than half those of their counterparts. With these statistics, Senate President Jeff Kessler convened a new committee at this session. The Senate Select Committee on Children and Poverty consists of the chairs of every major committee in the Senate and members of the minority. It meets every Wednesday at the Capitol and has already held one field hearing in Fayette County. Joining us tonight is the chairman of the Select Committee. Senator John Unger is the Senate's majority leader. He was first elected to the Senate in 1998. He is an ordained Lutheran pastor from Berkeley County. Senator, welcome. So glad you're here.
Thanks, Ben.
Let's talk about the education bill just for a little bit first. Okay. Is it unusual for a bill to be introduced, go through an education committee, go through the finance committee, go onto the floor, and then suddenly stop and it's negotiated between all the parties involved? That seems unusual to me.
Well, actually, it's been negotiated quite some time. I mean, all the way through the process. But the legislative process allows that input along the way. And what we wanted to try to do is get it in a fashion where the House can accept it and actually streamline it and get it passed and on the governor's desk. So a lot of the negotiations, a lot of the discussions occurred while the bill was over in the Senate. Now the House will take a look at it, but they've also been involved with these discussions as well. I mean, this is a very important piece of legislation. It's a start within education reform. It's not the final piece of legislation, so we have a ways to go.
It's an agreed to bill. Is that what it's called? An agreed to bill? All the parties have agreed to it.
A lot of the parties have agreed to it. I guess there's still a lot of folks that would rather have or would like to have other things included. I mean, for example, this is the first bill with education reform, but we're on a journey. And I've often said that, you know, you can have the best teachers, the best classes, the best facilities, the best curriculum, the most modern technology, and have that child in the seat. But if that child's worried about their next meal or the home they're going to go home to, or if they're going to be able to go to a home, they're not present. And so no matter what we talk about as far as education reform, we have to address the 91% of the child's time that's outside the classroom and the environment in which they find themselves in. And that's what the Select Committee on Children and Poverty is attempting to do, so that you could say that we're also involved with education reform in that area.
What do you want this committee to do?
Well, actually, overall, I guess want to change hearts and minds and a culture. not so much have a 12-point plan and legislation. We'll have that. And also we'll be working with communities to set up different initiatives and coordinate services. But overall, we have to change a culture and the way we look at things. And what I really want to do is to make sure that legislators, when they're looking at a piece of legislation, they not only look at the fiscal note, they not only look at the job impact, but they also look at it through the eyes of a child. Looking at how can that change the environment, create a healthy environment for that child to develop. Because as you mentioned in the statistics, that between the ages of 0 to 8 years old, a child's development is very critical. And poverty leads that child. You can almost statistically predict that if that child, as far as the environment that child finds herself in, can predict if they're going to be, as far as their student achievement, teenage pregnancy, substance abuse, all kinds of health issues, incarceration. So instead of being always reactive, let's be proactive in providing the resources and support that a child needs in his or her development.
Here is a young woman who appeared before your committee last week. Her name is Brianna Heater. She grew up in Buchanan, and let's review her story. Let's take a look.
At the age of 10, I had started enduring some difficult parts of my life. I had moved in with my father, which is a registered sex offender. We started making methamphetamines. He actually showed me how to make it. He actually took me out of school, homeschooled me so I could be at home with him. At the age of 14, I had got pregnant. I was on probation at the time for fighting. I had got pregnant and I was failing drug tests repeatedly for meth. I had got taken from my mom and put into a juvenile justice system.
Now, I understand that this young woman is in trouble with the law in another state, but that's the pattern, isn't it? We find that children in poverty will reoffend again and again and again unless that pattern is broken. What do you think the committee could do for someone like Brianna, who was taken out of school and homeschooled by a registered sex offender? I mean, that's got to be against the law. Yeah. So what can we do for Brianna or children like her?
During that, we found out about the ACE evaluation that the Center for Disease Control has. That's Adverse Childhood Experience. And out of 10, she scored 10, which is the negative, that she had all these different factors that impact her life from the age of 0 to 8. And it actually, a child's brain is rewired at that point. But she had shared with us, and she had a lot of courage to share her life story with us. She shared with us that her daughter has a 0. So we've broken that cycle in the sense that her daughter's not living in the same adverse environment that she has lived through. And with that, her daughter will not experience the health problems and substance abuse and all the other things that have gone along with it. So it can be done. If we have the political will and the community if they come together, we can break that cycle.
How did the meeting go in Fayette County?
It was wonderful, although the stories were so impactful. And we had around 150 to 200 people. It was wall-to-wall people. And a lot of folks shared their stories. They had a lot of courage, and particularly when they were growing up in children and how they survived. And so we did learn a lot. I mean, it was a lot to take in. But the one thing I found there that actually Senator Laird and Senator Miller from that area said that for the first time they saw a lot of energy and hope there, and that people were actually working together. There was one woman that stood up and told about her life, and that the reason she was there is because she wanted something to eat and also to tell us her story and her children's story, and how she only lives off $500 a month, and she didn't know where to feed her children, so they came for a meal. But afterwards, the whole community rallied together to try to help her. And that's the idea, is not so much to have community dependent on the state legislature or the governor in solving problems, but really have us all working together as a community to address this issue.
Do we dare bring up, as we talk about children in poverty, do we bring up West Virginia's so-called entitlement mentality? I grew up poor, the world owes me something. Do you feel that West Virginia has that?
I think we have a dependency culture, and I think a lot of that comes because of the politicians and the leaders of the past. I mean, it's one of those that's how people get reelected. If a group of people come with an issue, they say, look, I'll get you the money, or I'll do this for you, and that creates a dependency. I would rather for us to actually empower people to be a partnership and not just to be dependent. And so this is one of the other things the Select Committee is going to look at, is not just another government program or how to spend more government money for things, but to really look at a community and empower. You know, the great political parodies, The Wizard of Oz, and Dorothy and the Scarecrow and Tin Man and Lion all wanted something, right? And they all said the wizard can provide it. But when they got there and met the wizard couldn't provide because he was just a little old man in the movie. Well, what they found out is through the journey, they all had what they needed. Dorothy had the slippers because she killed the Wicked Witch. Scarecrow maneuvered the group through the course, and he had a brain. Tin Man sacrificed himself and saved the group from the rains. He had a heart. And Lion fought out the flying monkey, so he had courage. But they all had it, and they had it by taking the journey together and working together as a community. And so they didn't need to depend on a politician or someone to do it for them. They did it themselves.
That's an interesting analogy. Really interesting. How long do you expect this effort to take? How long will the Senate Select Committee meet? And for how many years? Is it a permanent committee now? What do you expect the future to hold for this committee and its work?
Well, this Select Committee is for 2 years, at least 2 years. It can be renewed. The idea is we're a special Select Committee, so we're not just during the session. We can be during the interims and also outside interims. We can travel anywhere. We held our first meeting, and that was a historical meeting because not too often that an actual meeting during legislative session happens outside the Capitol. And we're going to continue to go out into the communities because, again, it's not the idea that people need to come to us like the great city, the Emerald City of the Wizard of Oz. But instead, we need to be going out and working with the communities. And so this is going to take as long as it needs. And it's going to take a while. I mean, you think about it. I mean, we've gotten to this point where over half of our children here in West Virginia are either near or in poverty. And so it's going to take some time to change a mindset, to change a culture in order to look at it through the eyes of a child and address the issue. You know, Beth, we can argue about why people are poor. You can debate the issue. Maybe they had made wrong life decisions. They're not working as hard. But the one thing we can argue is that child being poor. There's nothing that child ever did in order to put themselves in that situation. And there's nothing they can do to pull themselves up from the bootstraps. So if we're going to ignore this, from 0 to 8, they're going to develop in an area where later on we're going to pay a lot more money for it. So I'm saying let's go back to the future. Let's go right back to that child's development. Let's create a healthy child, because a healthy child creates a healthy family. Healthy families create healthy communities, and healthy communities create a healthy state.
Tell me about your Beckley meeting.
Well, the Beckley meeting will be this Wednesday. It'll be at the Raleigh County Council on Aging, and we're at 7 p.m., and we're going to again receive testimony. We want to hear from people who are actually living in poverty, or children. We want to hear from those that are experiencing it and hear from them firsthand of their ideas and their suggestions of what we can do together in order to address this issue.
Senator John Unger, always good to have you. Thank you so much, and good luck with it.
Thank you very much, Beth.
And here's a look at some of the bills introduced in the House today. Among the bills introduced in the House today, House Bill 2953 to raise the West Virginia minimum wage to $8.50 an hour. House Bill 2955 to create a new commission for service to veterans and others suffering from traumatic brain injuries. House Bill 2957 to authorize a pilot program to increase powers of county self-government, or a county home rule pilot program. And House Bill 2959 to provide that paid county or municipal fire departments and duly incorporated volunteer fire departments pay reduced workers' compensation premiums when not actively engaged in firefighting. The insurance commissioner is to determine the premiums. Only one bill up for passage in the House tomorrow, House Bill 2861, to remove a deterrent to public schools seeking and assisting the enrollment of a student who is at risk and is becoming a discouraged and defeated learner. Tomorrow, we'll continue our discussion about childhood poverty with Ted Bettner, the Executive Director of the West Virginia Center on Budget and Policy. The center has published a new study entitled Child Poverty in West Virginia, a Growing and Persistent Problem. Also with us will be Stephen Smith, the Executive Director of the West Virginia Healthy Kids and Families Coalition that's working to raise young children out of poverty. This has been the Legislature Today. I'm Beth Voorhees. Thanks for joining us. Good night.
Support for the Legislature Today has been provided by the following. The High Technology Foundation, headquartered at the I-79 Technology Park in Fairmont. Online at wvhtf.org. Connecting West Virginia families and businesses through high-speed internet services. Learn more about connecting at frontier.com.